There we go. So I'm going to do a very brief introduction here of a wonderful old friend and way younger than me, but an old friend and a new friend, Kadra Abdi and Laura Kuhlman, both representing the Center for Victims of Torture. As was mentioned, I spent about 8 years, actually almost a decade, working with the Oslo Center for Peace and Human Rights, and they were some of the most incredible years of my life, of the best career that I had. And I think a highlight of that time was when I was working with the University of Minnesota and working with some of the master's students at the Humphrey School, one of which was Kadra. I think Kadra and Laura, you should come up here now, because I'm not going to be long. I'm going to do a rather unusual introduction of the participants today. I'm going to introduce them at the same time, the two that are present here, and then the American host family father of Roman is going to introduce Roman. Kurt will be coming up to introduce him. So Laura is from Minneapolis originally, went to Colorado for a number of years, just like my son. He came back 11 years later with a wife and two daughters.
I came back with a husband and one son.
And Kadra was born and spent her formative years in Somalia, spent some time in a refugee camp in northern Kenya, and was brought to the United States, actually to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, by Lutheran Social Services. She grew up there and graduated from Cedar Rapids High School. And then both of these two women, very accomplished women, by the way, were graduates of Luther College in Decorah, Iowa. They actually went to school at the same time, but one of them was a couple of years ahead of the other. I'm not going to say which. One of the things that Kadra knows that I'm going to say, because it always brings a smile to her face and really brings one to mind, is that in her senior year, she was elected president of the senior class at Luther College. I just think that's a tremendous accomplishment. But the other thing I have to say about Kadra, every time she walks into a room and we meet, her smiling face brings a smile to me. I was once appointed an honorary Somali, and of all of my Somali friends, the one thing that I think all of them have in common is that I think that they're the happiest people in the world. And Kadra is always smiling. She was such a great person to work with. Kadra is very familiar with Mindekirken, by the way. She came to a number of you boards. So anyway, Kadra has a very long bio of all of the things that she's accomplished since we stopped working together, I think in 2011. You graduated in 11? Yeah. And went on to become CEO of the current company that she's working with, and she'll tell you more about that. But then I'm not surprised at all that she became a board member of the Center for Victims of Torture. Minnesota is a mecca for, didn't use that on purpose, but it's a mecca for peace and human rights organizations. And you think of Center for Victims of Torture, the Advocates for Human Rights. I guess I could go on, but they were founded here in Minnesota. And the other thing about Minnesota is that it's always been a very welcoming state for refugees and immigrants, the immigrant communities. So I've taken way more time than I thought I was going to take in my introduction. I might say that Laura is actually from St. Paul, not Minneapolis, and she pointed that out to me. She has a 5-year-old son, and yeah, she came back here and began working with the Center for Victims of Torture in 2018. And now I'll ask Kurt to come up and introduce our good friend, Roman.
Thanks for that. And Sharon is going to come up here too, but I do have the distinct pleasure of introducing our son, our Ukrainian son, Roman Polishchuk. Hi, Roman.
Hey.
Good to see you. We had the pleasure of hosting Roman as an exchange student in 2012-13, I think it was. And we introduced him to Orlin. Orlin kind of became a mentor to him, got him involved, got him a couple speaking engagements with Oslo Center for Peace in Norway and
Partnership for Change.
Partnership for Change. Was over here for Nobel Peace Prize Forum
And spoke.
and yeah, we're just so grateful to have the opportunity to know Roman. Roman was recently married in Christmas Eve to Juliana, who is also a wonderful young woman.
And our daughter-in-law.
And her daughter-in-law. Roman has had a varied career, has done a number of different things. Salesman for Zoom, computer thing, salesman for a lot of other things, life coach. I don't know what else you're involved in, Roman. Juliana is a psychologist working with people with PTSD. Now, Roman and Juliana at the beginning of the war in Ukraine were working very much with refugees that would come into Lviv, which is where they live, which is in the western part of the country. They were fleeing the conflict in the east. And so they spent a lot of time volunteering and working with those people. People would come in and they were so traumatized that they didn't even know, they couldn't even give them their name. So it was very traumatic. And I'm sure you have probably worked with those kind of people. So good to see you, Roman. Looking forward to hearing you today.
Yes, very much so.
Thank you very much, for sharing. So I knew you'd want to do that. Just another word. Hello, Roman. Another word about Roman. One of the things that was so impressive was impressive is the participation that he has had in many of the forums that the Oslo Center has put on. And in 2014, we organized a conference forum actually in Oslo, Norway called Crisis and Democracy, Ukraine. And that was when Russia invaded Crimea. And we brought Roman from, he was a student, young student at Lviv University at the time. And we brought him over and he was the keynote speaker at 19 with all of these other diplomats that were on the forum program. Very impressive and really held his own in the forum itself. It was still one of the most impressive performances of a young student that I've ever seen. And I was always impressed with Roman. It went up sky high after 2014. So we've remained friends and in contact for all of this time. I'm going to ask Laura to come up and talk a little bit about the Center of Victims of Torture, and then and Kadra will say a few words possibly also, but I think you're primarily going to answer questions during Q&A, and then so Roman will talk a little bit about what's going on in Ukraine, and with a special emphasis on what's happening with the citizenry, because we know that the atrocities that are wrought upon the Ukraine people are absolutely horrible. And I think that afterwards we can talk a little bit about how the Center for Victims of Torture would step in to help in the aftermath of that terrible conflict over there. So with that, I'll ask Laura to come up.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the wonderful hospitality today. It has been lovely sharing a meal with you all and getting to be together. As Roman said, my name is Laura, and I have had the pleasure of working at the Center for Victims of Torture for almost 6 years now. And through that time, I have gotten to meet survivors that we have extended care to. And something that I hear over and over again in meeting folks that we serve, and I get to see that they, despite all they've been through, have a resilience and a hope for a better life for themselves. And it is a true honor to be able to be a very small part in that healing. So as Orlin mentioned, the Center for Victims of Torture is a large global human rights organization. Through our work and the partner organizations that we serve, we're able to help people on nearly every single continent. We have about 450 staff, and we've been working since 1985, but we were founded right here in Minnesota. And I love our origin story. So if you'll permit me, I want to say it. When Governor Rudy Perpich was governor of the state, his son, Rudy Jr., was in law school and was volunteering with Amnesty International. And one day Rudy just marched right up to his dad and said, "Dad, what are you doing for human rights?" And apparently Governor Perpich was so moved and inspired by his son's challenge that he brought together this large group of experts, community leaders, and asked them to put together a list of things that he could do as governor to support and uplift human rights. And from a long list of ideas, Governor Perpich chose what we think is pretty unconventional, and we're so glad he did. He formed the Center specifically for mental health rehabilitation for torture survivors in Minnesota. So a couple of things that are important about that is the people that we serve at CVT and who we started with are refugees and asylum seekers. And as Orlin mentioned, Minnesota is a beacon of light and hope. And there's just a giant welcome sign. And I think that's something that our community should be very proud of, is how welcoming and open we are to refugees and asylum seekers. And I say that is important because part of what CVT does is we do a lot of research on the work that we do. And from our research, we know that almost 50% of refugees are survivors of torture. And that is a huge number when you think about how many people are forcibly displaced from their homes and what they have endured. So the fact that we have the ability to help extend a welcome and extend care and equip survivors with the tools to find hope and dig into their resilience is something that I'm very, very proud to be part of. And I love that Minnesota is really where we began. Something I like to say, and having met so many survivors, is that every single survivor we work with has a story that is worth sharing and a story that is worth hearing. And whether the survivors are in Jordan, Iraq, Turkey, Ethiopia, Uganda, Kenya, Minnesota, Georgia, Arizona, all of the places we work, every single survivor has a unique story. And if you'll permit me, I'd love to tell you about one survivor in particular. So I recently, just last month, returned from visiting our programs in Kenya. And when I was there, I got to meet with several survivors. And there was one, I'm going to call her Jane, and her smile just lit up the room. And any room she was in, her smile was just huge. And she had this infectious laughter. And she's about 20, so she's pretty young, and she just kept asking to take silly selfie photos with us. She's just so joyful. But the Jane that I met just last month is not the Jane that first arrived in Nairobi. Jane is from Uganda, and in Uganda, it is a very dangerous country to be openly gay. And Jane identifies as a lesbian, and she wanted to live her true life. She wanted to be true to herself. And so she came out to her family, and her family tried to harm her because of that. And she wasn't safe in her home, and she had to flee. And so she left her home, her friends, her family, and was a refugee in Nairobi. And she went from having stability, safety, support to living alone on the streets, trying to find maybe another piece of cardboard to sleep on. Every day was a struggle. It was a fight for survival. And she kind of gotten to the point where she just didn't want to fight anymore. But that's when she found CVT, and she joined one of our 10-week group counseling programs. And she every week was able to walk into this beautiful oasis in the middle of a very punishing city and sit down surrounded by people who had a similar experience that she did. And she was able to see that she wasn't alone, that what happened to her wasn't her fault, that she has a life worth living, and she was able to find that joyful spirit again. And she shared with me, she said that she didn't know how much longer she could keep going before she met CBT. And now I can't imagine a world without her in it. And I am so glad that I don't have to do that. And I think that's the power of community, and that's the power of healing and acceptance. And this is something that with our greater community of support, we're able to extend to tens of thousands of survivors all over the world. I could go on and tell you so many more stories, but I think I'll leave it there for now. I'm really excited to engage in conversation and answer questions you might have about our work. But thank you for letting me share Jane's story with you and for letting me be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. We're going to move right on to Roman Posacek now. Roman, in Ukraine, they also celebrate Valentine's Day, and he's torn himself away from Juliana for their Valentine's dinner. It's a little after 8 p.m. in Ukraine. So, Roman, you're on. Thank you.
Thank you, Orlin. Is it possible to turn the camera so that I can see some people there?
Yes, we can do that.
We can try it. We have to turn.
I would really appreciate that.
Turn the whole laptop. I have to turn the laptop.
Because the painting on the wall is beautiful, but seeing human faces is much.
We don't have extra, hang on, I go this way. Sorry. It's a mess,
So we can move this back a little bit.
maybe.
Turn the whole.
I'm talking.
That would have been an idea, but the cords are short. But, we'll try it. Orlin, can you give me that phone?
Awesome. Can you hear me?
No, we have to turn everything with you. This isn't complicated.
Oh, now I
Hold on.
get it.
Just
you
a
hear-
second. Can you,
Hello. Can
you
you
can
hear
sort
me?
of see.
I can hear.
Can everybody else hear?
Terry, I can hear.
Okay,
Roman.
good. All right, good.
We good?
Okay.
I was just kind of expecting that everybody in the crowd is going to go, hell yeah, So thank you everyone for having me here today. Hello, I really appreciate it. It's a great honor for me. I was honored when I was staying with Kurt and Sharon to visit the church on a few occasions. So I kind of know how it looks in there and the beautiful crowd that it gathers every single time. So again, thank you all for taking the time to have me and for me to have an opportunity to share a little bit more about what is happening in Ukraine. And the importance of the work that the Center for Victims of Torture is doing. Because my role here today is to share the life examples of what is happening around the world right now. And as you might know, the situation in Ukraine is pretty bad and tragic. Overall, the situation goes as follows. So we are almost 1 year into the absolute total warfare with Russian Federation. They have been trying to strike from all sorts of locations, mainly from the east. As you might know, they've been getting close to Kiev, which is the capital of Ukraine, but then our forces threw them back. We regained parts of the territories, but overall, the situation is heated. We are approaching a 1 year mark of the time when the total warfare has started. Currently, Russians have lost over 130,000 of their troops in Ukraine and continue to lose around 1,000 every single day. So you can imagine the scale of the war that is happening currently. From Ukrainian side, we have around 1 million people involved in the military. Up to this day, we have around 10 million of people being displaced, probably more than that. Thousands, tens of thousands of civilians have been killed, especially in the bigger cities that have been occupied and shelled and totally leveled to the ground, like city of Mariupol. So yeah, that's how it unfolds. There is an expectation of a big offensive happening from the Russian side again. So that's why Ukraine is trying to speak to the world and get more support, like tanks, like planes, etc., so that we can protect ourselves and stop this bloodbath. And overall, I was talking to Orlin yesterday. We kind of had a pre-talk, and I was sharing with him that, you know, the message that I wanted to convey to you and explain of what is actually happening and why Ukraine needs this support, because there's a lot of speculations that, you know, we shouldn't provide any military support to Ukraine. We should just do peace talks, you know, and that sort of stuff. Everybody wants peace. No Ukrainian wants to be at war today. But what we have are Russian troops standing in front of our cities and constantly shelling the cities and killing civilians and destroying infrastructure, and you know, just totally trying to erase every single Ukrainian that happens to exist on this land. And quite a few countries have already recognized this as a genocide of Ukraine. So we are not talking about just some sort of a group of people that is trying to go out to the news and speak out. We are talking about a 45 million people country that have their own culture and traditions and history. It's an independent country that is recognized by all the UN participants. So what we are trying to do, we are trying to protect ourselves. We are trying to survive. And we are trying to stop the ultimate evil that is trying to destroy everything on its way. And so that is why we need this support. And as I was talking to Orlin, I was making this analogy that by helping Ukraine more actively, we are preventing more people from dying. This is ultimately what happens. If Ukraine has enough resources, if we have enough supplies, if we have enough weapons, we can stop this war faster rather than if we don't have it. Because for any Ukrainian, there is no way of just surrender and say, do whatever you want to us, because we have seen what happened on the parts of Ukraine that have been temporarily occupied and then deoccupied. And this is where the work of the Center for Victims of Torture is going to arrive. And I wanted to speak with their team because the evidence of the amounts of torture that was happening on the temporarily occupied territories is immense. They had separate facilities and locations where they held people, where they tortured people. I'm not going to go into the details about that. There's tons of evidence of that. There are mass burials of people where thousands of people, innocent people, have been buried because they've been trying to cover up their war crimes. So that's the situation, and unfortunately, I do not like to describe it in that way, but this is where we currently live. But we all hope for the best. We continue to fight. We continue to get the support from United States. We continue to get support from European countries, from Australia, from UK, from countries in the African continent, and so many others. And so by providing your support, by subtracting a few dollars from your tax dollars being paid, we get the necessary support so that we can protect ourselves and we can save people. And this is what's happening. So I want to thank all of you for your support, even if it's not direct. because it means a lot to us, and it helps us to save human lives at large scale. What else did I want to share? I wanted to say that currently there is a need for more support, as there always is in this kind of situations. So we have the government support from other countries, but we also have civilian support. For example, I'm a member of Rotary International and a member of one of the local clubs here in Ukraine. We actively work with clubs from Germany, from United Kingdom. Just today, we had a big truck, 20-ton truck arrive with power generators and clothing and food, etc. And that has been happening almost every single day since the war began. We are not talking about private initiatives of people. For example, I've been collecting some money. A bunch of my friends have been doing the same thing. And by doing so collectively, we are supporting our troops, we are supporting internally displaced people. We can provide the most necessary things like filters for water, like food, hygiene products, etc. Not talking about more complex things. Orlin said that I can share that with you, and currently I'm working on a project where I want to purchase food warmers for people that are currently located in the east because it's cold. Ukraine has a similar climate that Minnesota has. So if you would want to support that, feel free to get some contact information from Kurt and Sharon. I'll be purchasing some of them either in Europe or in the US, shipping to Ukraine and then distributing to the people that need that. There's definitely going to be reporting on this. So if you want to support that initiative, let me know. Overall, I just want to thank every single one of you, especially Kurt and Sharon and Orlin and everyone for the great support that I have been personally getting from the first day of war and before that. It means a lot knowing that there are other people in the world that care, that understand what is happening, that want the good to prevail, and that believe and have proper values. Thank you again. I can never thank enough for everything and everybody's support and prayers. Happy Valentine's Day. That's how dramatically I'm going to end that.
Can I answer a couple of questions?
Yeah, is this on? No. Roman, do you have a few more minutes to answer questions? Okay,
Absolutely.
we'll start right away. I wanted to make sure that everyone understood the special fundraising project that Roman is working on. I didn't hear it well, but it's foot warmers for the soldiers on the front line in the East. Is that correct, Roman?
Yep.
Yeah. And all he needs is $5,000. Sharon and Kurt, I don't know if you have a GoFundMe page or if you have any kind of support. It's something that we could do. Mark mentioned that we could do a GoFundMe, and anyone that would like to participate, maybe that could be distributed to the membership of the Tuesday luncheon group, Tuesday open house. So with that, I wanted to quickly just say a few more things about Kadra before she comes up. Oh, she says no. She has so many things that she is involved in, but I wanted to mention that she's the CEO of Synergy LLC. It's a consulting business, and they work with nonprofits crafting strategies and to counteract the often negative assumptions that arise between historically marginalized communities and mainstream communities. She also works for the with the Metropolitan Consortium of Community Developers as a business and community wealth building advisor. I'm going to drop down to the bottom here and just say that she holds a master's of public policy degree with emphasis on gender and global policy from the Humphrey School of Public Affairs. And that's the 2 years that we worked so closely together. And then she has a bachelor's degree in anthropology and women and gender studies from Luther College. Laura and yeah, why don't you come up here?
So you have time for questions after.
So Kadra, yeah, so we're ready for questions right now. And I'll repeat them or.
Okay, hello, Roman, I'm Gunnar. I don't know if you can see me. I am the pastor here, and I've heard so much about you from Sharon and Chris. I think I know you pretty well. I can hear that when you were here, you were, one of your exercises was to grab Sharon and lift her up in the air, so you must be pretty strong. Very good. I have some questions about, or a question about the general mood for the general population, because of course, well, I have been working in Norway with post-traumatic stress disorder and after air crashes and all kind of stuff, and all traumatic events. And usually we see three different kind of reactions after traumas like that. We can see intrusion, that people feel intruded day and night in dreams and also daylight by things that has happened to them. We also have what we call arousal of certain hard and strong feelings when they hear siren or hear some the phone calling or something else. And the third one is avoidance, when they try to avoid similar situations. Can you comment on that? Do you see any of those reactions on the civilian population there?
Right. That is a great question. So overall, for me, it's hard to assess because I'm not working directly with internally displaced people. There's a bunch of organizations that do and that I'm supporting here in Ukraine. Overall, I would say that any Ukrainian that woke up in the morning when the war started felt all of the things that you are describing right there. I personally have been sweating for the first 5 days nonstop. I was just changing my t-shirts probably every 5 hours because I just couldn't stop sweating. I was feeling bad. I couldn't sleep at night, constantly worried, constantly agitated because you didn't know what was going to happen, even though, here in Lviv, it was kind of a safer place. If we are talking about the people that have been staying under constant shelling in cities, and some still do, for example, like the city of Bakhmut, where the shelling never stops. It goes on 24/7 for the past months. Definitely people suffer a lot. They have very deep trauma coming out of it. They experience a lot of problems, including like socializing. They cannot actively do that. They cannot come out. They want to stay in. They have severe like body reactions like you are describing. So absolutely, I know also a lot of people that have an opportunity, for example, to leave Ukraine and stay abroad where it is considered to be safe. And those people actually suffered even more on the psychological level because they would still look up the news, they would still see what is happening, but they were not physically present. And so for them, it was even harder knowing that they are not there, that they are not being part of this, and being worried for all of their friends, and the family. So yeah, absolutely, those things are there. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. We are not even talking about the people that had psychological issues before the war started, and then when the war came, it just triggered it and made it so much worse. For a lot of people, it has absolutely, not for a lot, but for everybody here in Ukraine, it disrupt their lives as they have been existed before. Now, as time goes by, we are adapting, but we are adapting to not normal situations, which means we are not adapting in a normal way either. The Russians have been targeting, for example, the critical infrastructure of Ukraine, so we would stay without electricity for a few days. Then we would have no electricity for hours during the day in winter. So you couldn't do your work properly. You couldn't, do the regular things that you wanted. You want to cook, but then when you have no light, you cannot cook. So you have to plan that. You have to wake up at certain hours. You have to go to bed at certain hours because you're planning your day absolutely differently. Then you wake up in the morning, you need to go to work or something. You have air aid alarm. So you have to go to the basement, and then you hear rockets flying, and then you hear air defense taking them down. So yeah, that's the reality. And if we are talking about civilian population, it has been impacted in a major way. Not talking about that almost every single family had a family member that has died, either civilian or that had been part of the military, which is also an enormous loss for any person. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I was trying.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. Thank you, Roman. I have,
That's kind of have to be near here.
Oh,
I think,
okay.
for you.
okay, so Roman, I don't have a question. I actually have a request for Laura. Perhaps Kadra would also like to address this, but I would like them to talk a little bit about how CBT would become engaged in Ukraine after in the aftermath of this conflict, and hopefully it's not going to be a long conflict. Laura? Come forward to that.
Thank you, Orlin. So right now, CBT we are not working in Ukraine. Recently, we did secure the funds to do what we call an assessment. So what's really important for our organization is anytime we enter a new country, a new place where in the aftermath of war or other intense trauma, we want to make sure that we are able to add something and we're not just kind of getting in the way, if that makes sense. So we want to make sure that one, we're able to sustain our work so that we have a plan for going in, and we don't want to just go in and then leave if we say don't have enough funding to maintain that work. And it does take quite a bit of resources to do our type of work, and something that is important for us to remember is mental health rehabilitation, kind of healing from the traumas, is really, really difficult when you are in the middle of crisis, when your life is at risk, when you're just trying to survive. You really aren't in a spot where you can do that intense healing work, and it is a lot of work to start to recover from something as horrible as what's happening in Ukraine right now. So really the baseline for starting to heal after trauma is having some sort of safety and stability, which unfortunately right now is not, from my understanding, not really happening in Ukraine. And so our hope would be that we, once the war is over, we would be able to go in and start doing some work there. But we haven't begun our assessment yet. And so what that means is we will be sending a team to talk to other organizations who are already on the ground and really try to figure out what role CBT could play with our almost 4 decades of experience helping people recover from trauma, but we're not there yet. I don't know, Kadra.
Try something here.
Okay, I guess to put something.
Trying to get you in the picture too. but-
Oh. There I am. Okay, so I just wanted to make a quick comment that as I was listening to Roman now, one of the things that really put things into perspective for me, and I'm sure for Kurt and Sharon as well, is a video chat, several video chats that I've had with Roman and Juliana. And they're in a bomb shelter, basically down in the basement in a concrete surroundings. And as you were saying, with missiles whistling overhead, that really puts things into perspective for us. Are there any questions from the audience?
Can I have one more? Sorry.
Stand up.
Yeah, I'd like to ask these outstanding representatives from the center here. And as I said, I've been working quite a lot with this in Norway. We have 2 kind of schools in Norway. The psychologists who say that debriefing and working with PTSD is very helpful, and psychiatrists who say that sometimes it just makes things worse. I'm confident about that. And also the other thing is that we know that there are, well, they have started to talk about the PTSD 1 and PTSD 2, Versus two is the more long-standing living in a war like this, when you have so not only one traumatic event, but traumas every single day. Can you comment on the difference between those two, or what you think?
Hi, everyone. So the comment that I would provide is that, at CBT, we have clinicians who work with the clients. So they, they have the meeting and,
Yeah. So you're in the camera.
So we have clinicians who work with the clients that we serve in all of our different healing centers. So I think they would speak better to that question. What I, as a board member, get to hear is like stories. So the story that, Laura shared about the young person that she encountered at the refugee camp. And something that we keep hearing is that healing is not linear, right? And we don't make these connections with the clients and just stop, because each client has a different story, different circumstance, and different needs. So just like the difference, like, what hurts, what helps, I think, they would make that assessment. And based on that assessment, which is individual, they would come up with a plan and they would continue to work with the client. And oftentimes what happens is the clients come with, the trauma from back home at a refugee camp or in a, war zone. And a lot of times what happens is that they can also be traumatized, right? And so then having a different strategy of how to provide support for that client. So maybe next time, if you're interested in more like the clinician, perspective, we can invite a clinician to come and speak to that. I'm a board member. I support the work that Laura does. Laura is in the development side of the organization. So we help fundraise and support the work that Laura and other clinicians at the organization do. Do you have anything? No, okay. Yeah.
I might mention that I was at, I did some work with CBT. Sorry.
It's good on video. Yeah, like that maybe, but stay close to here, because.
Oh, okay. There we go. I'll learn. So when I worked with the Oslo Center for Peace and Human Rights for that nearly a decade, I worked with advocates for human rights and to some extent the Center for Victims of Torture and also the organization at William Mitchell on genocide. I don't remember the full name of it, but anyway, I was at a breakfast last fall, annual breakfast for CBT, and I listened to the speakers. And after that program, I became a card-carrying member and contribute monthly. Mark and I do to this organization because their work is so very important. Any other questions from the audience? Yeah. Okay, well, I'll come over there. Well, yeah, and just speaking. Okay. Oh, is the coffee shop still open?
Yep.
I had the great privilege of being with this wonderful man. And I just would like to have you have an opportunity to give us one final word. I've been doing presentations ever since I came back and trying to bring a word. But your word would be the one I'd like to hear. Can you bring us, before we close, a word that you'd like to share with all of us? 20 minutes left. And then we have 20 minutes left? Okay, you got 20 minutes. I'm gonna record whatever I can. Okay, more questions? But that's what I'd like to hear from him at some point. Okay, thank you, Roman. Good to see you.
Thank you.
You want to answer to that now? Okay, let's take another question, and I'm going to bring the microphone to you, Sharon.
When the war first started, I remember you talking about going to the train station, both you and Juliana, and helping people. And I thought that was incredibly brave. And I also thought, wow, I mean, it just kind of tells you who the Ukrainian people are. In the midst of such a terrible war, they're still trying to help each other. They are helping each other. And that's what's gonna get you through. I know that Juliana has been working with PTSD victims, and you've been supporting her and just doing things with her and without her that have just helped people who have been through incredible trauma and torture to get back to living a good life again. So I really thank you for that. And if you wanted to talk about your work at the train station, I think that would be interesting for people.
Roman, were you able to hear?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Sharon, for bringing it up. I'll just give a very short comment on that. It was actually during the first days when the war began, and just to give you a perspective, Ukraine is in a way of life and everything is no different than US, right? So you wake up every day, you go to work, you have your favorite cafe, you go to restaurants, you meet your friends, you drink wine. You do all the regular things. It's just another country, but people are the same. And so it's really hard to explain how it was, but for me, basically I woke up at 7 in the morning and I opened up my phone to check what's happening, because it was kind of, there have been reports that something might go on, US, that people should leave Ukraine, etc. And so I opened the news and I just see that Russia invaded, and I see those videos of helicopters just flying into Ukraine and shooting at buildings and killing people, and tanks rolling in. Like, it was absolute madness, and you can imagine the same thing happening to you. You sit in Minnesota and then the next thing you know, there are helicopters flying and shooting rockets. Like, it's hard to comprehend going from number one to the place where all of that is happening. But that was the reality. And it was extremely hard to comprehend that. As I say, for the first 2-3 days, we basically stayed at home. We didn't even leave because we didn't know what to do. We didn't know what was going to happen, whether Russians are going to come into our city here, whether we will have to defend ourselves. We've been looking for ways to do that. We've been started preparing Molotov cocktails. It's hard to imagine, but that's the reality. We've been ready to die here. And so after things have kind of cleared out a little bit and we realized that we should go and do something, that was like the first question that we asked each other is what can we do? What is in our power? Of course, first thing, there have been a lot of people collecting money to purchase all sorts of medical supplies because there have been a lot of wounded. So we donated most of the money that we had. Then we thought, what's the next thing? Well, the next thing is tons of refugees that are just piling up at the train station. So we grabbed almost all of the clothing that we had. Juliana was left with a pair of jeans and a jacket, and everything else we just packed in the bags and we gave away. And then the next thing I thought, like, what is the best place to go and do something? It was the train station, because everybody was coming by train. Again, it's hard to describe, but it was just packed with people, and people were arriving all the time. The trains were arriving and people coming out the trains. People been jumping under trains. People been screaming, people with kids, older people. I mean, it's just a whole mess. I came down there, and the whole main train station of the Western Ukraine, there have been 5 volunteers standing at a little desk trying to help people. And there have been like tens of thousands of people coming out. And so I came to them and said, what can I do to help? And they said, here are the printouts where they had the locations of where people could go in the city to get some help, because they've been trying to move people off the train station so that they could actually, have more space there. And so I decided that I'm going to help, and I grabbed those sheets of paper and came down. And as people been coming out, I started approaching them and saying, can I help you? Here are the locations. But they've been so scared that they didn't trust me. They didn't know who I am. They couldn't, think that there is somebody to help them. And all of them have been asking the same question: how do we leave the country? They've been so scared that the only thing they wanted is to just go as far as possible, because everybody was just so scared. And so this is how the first days went on, and this is what we've been working on. And this is the story. And thank you, Sharon, for bringing it up. You know, it's kind of a traumatic experience for me as well, remembering all of those things. But at the same time, it is important to remember what was happening. And again, for me, staying here in Lviv is nothing to compare to people that lived in the eastern parts of Ukraine. For example, one of my closest friends, she used to live in Donetsk, and in 2014, Russians had shelled Donetsk, and so she had to run, and she almost got killed. And since then, she was living in Lviv, and that's how we got to know each other. And just a little over a few months before the war started, she moved to Kiev, and then Kiev was shelled, so she had to run from Kiev again. And so you can imagine the stories of those people that and what they had to go through. They lost everything. You know, they've been saving their whole lives, building houses, you know, making their life, and now suddenly all of that is gone in a matter of seconds. And so, yeah, lots of devastation that came with that.
Thank you. Here's another question. Could you say your name and then speak directly into the mic? Roman, hold up your hand if you cannot hear.
I'm Diane, and I think I see a weakness that Russia has detected, which is that neither NATO nor the US can commit troops on the ground, because then it turns into a world war. And so now they're going to be throwing in like as much as 1/3 troops to, like, it's almost like a reinvasion. And they're using conscripts, like they're emptying their prisons, and they're just going to throw human power at Ukraine. And what are we going to do? Does anybody have any ideas?
Right. That is a good question, and it's great to hear a question from the person that has a little bit of a context of what is currently happening. So you're absolutely right. They're drawing more and more people, and they are throwing them into Ukraine. So far, we've been handling it pretty well. As I say, the daily count of killed Russian soldiers comes to around 1,000 daily. Not talking about injured, not talking about ones that deserted and ran away. So we are holding up. We are getting now support in form of tanks, which are extremely important. So we are going to get more and more of them as time goes by. Just today, there have been another meeting in military base in Ramstein, where now all the big security meetings are happening, including Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. One of the things that we've been heavily pressing for is air defense systems, which we have already done. The next level were tanks, which we're already getting and we'll be getting more. The next level will be fighter jets, which United States is pausing for now, so it's not going to happen. But we've been hearing the same things about every other types of weapons that we have been receiving, and then everything has been changing. I think that at the current stage, Russia they are preparing for the offensive. Analytical press and the organizations that are focusing on the warfare and analyzing all of that, they are saying that Russians do not have enough power to push too much further. And they have had no success basically since the beginning of the initial invasion. So the territories that they have captured, they already lost big parts of it. For example, major city of Kherson, they have lost that. The Ukrainians regained territories there and control. Now they are pushing into the cities like Soledar and Bakhmut. Bakhmut is a bigger city, and now it's basically leveled to the ground. Ukrainian troops are still in there. They're still holding the lines. It's hard to predict how it's going to develop, but at the same time, Russians do not have much more to offer. Everybody was scared of the Russians' military strength and power and their weapons and everything that had to do. Now they are bringing weapons from the polar locations, that were located there. They are bringing it to the east of Ukraine because they don't have enough. They are bringing all of their tanks from conservation. They have lost currently around, I think it was around 70% of all of their tanks that they had in Ukraine. So they, they have been using long range and wing rockets to attack the infrastructure. Now they are almost out of it. They do not have an opportunity to launch new offensive. So they buy drones from Iran and launch it into Ukraine because they don't have enough their own weapons to do that anymore. And because of the sanctions, they do not have the supplies to produce new weapons, even though there are some ways of how they are doing it. But overall, they are struggling on all fronts. Another problem is that, yes, they are drawing new people into the military, but none of them, almost none of them, have military experience. They have a low amount of supplies and gear that they can use. And basically, Russia is doing the same that the Soviet Union had been doing during the Second World War. They're just, taking a bunch of people and sending them to die. Like, that's what oftentimes is happening. Of course, they have more prepared and experienced units, but the majority of their troops looks exactly that way. And so our plan is to hold the line and slowly but steadily continue to do the work that we are doing. And hopefully sooner or later, the people inside of Russia will start protesting it, because again, 130,000 of their troops have already been killed. So you can imagine the scale we are talking about, and there are more and more coming in. They are recruiting ex-convicts to come and die in Ukraine. Now even those people don't want to do it. They are sabotaging because they know that they are going to die. Like, that's the road, and that's what Ukrainian government is trying to communicate to every Russian, that you shouldn't step on this ground because you are going to die. It's inevitable. And so that's how the situation looks like today. Of course, I'm trying to stay positive, though from hearing all the things that I'm saying today, it's hard to imagine how you can stay positive in this situation. But overall, we are fighting. And again, Russians can always stop the war by leaving Ukraine. If we stop the war, we all die in here. That's it. So we don't have that option, right? We need to get our territories back. We need to make sure that we have security guarantees, and only then we can, feel safe in this place. Other than that, it's impossible. The territories that have been temporarily occupied, Russians have exterminated every person that has been supporting Ukraine. Cities like Bucha and others north of Kiev, there have been mass burials. You found people civilian people with hands tied behind their back and shot in the head. And that those were all documented, and there is no way to fake any of that. Everyone has seen it. The whole world has seen it. Every reporter from any country in the world has been there. And so it's tough, but we are staying positive. We are working extremely hard. Every Ukrainian is working. Every Ukrainian is working on their job when they have an opportunity to. They donate the money, they pay the taxes, they take care of other people, they support each other, because that's the only way. And then we have the support from the rest of the world, which is also extremely important. And I think we are having an alliances being formed today, and the world order is changing. NATO is becoming stronger than ever right now, because there have been a lot of division. Now every NATO country is united, because everybody understands that it's a matter of the security of each separate country. Russia is basically banned from the world arena completely. Europe and US are banning purchasing of their energy supplies, etc. So it's the matter of how quickly we can do that. But I don't have doubts about the result of it. And the result is Ukraine prevailing, getting all our territories back, and Russian war criminals being prosecuted in the international court. That's it.
Thank you very much again. Remember, you can also direct questions to the Center of Victims of Torture, Kadra and Laura. And I also promised Roman that we'd get him back to Juliana after an hour, so that's coming up real quick here, and I do want to give everyone a chance to give a very brief closing remark. Name and-
Hi, my name is Sandra, and this is directed toward most likely Laura with regard to the work that you do. And I was just wondering if there's the most common reason that someone would end up being persecuted and become a victim of torture, and who is doing the torturing? Is it predominantly gangs? Is it government? Is it family? Just curious. Thank you.
Laura, I'll bring the microphone up to you.
Thank you for that question. People are tortured because they're standing up for what is right. I think that's a lot of what we experience. Some people are tortured because of who they are, who they love, how they choose to worship. So a lot of times it is because of their identities, and the torturers are anyone from their family members to the governments. You know, when you look at what happened in Syria, that was definitely government. When you look at, we work in East Africa, so a lot of people who were tortured by the Lord's Resistance Army is a really big one. So I think that question is, we can absolutely generalize, but it depends on where in the world and what conflict is going on. But more often than not, we do think it's because of people who just want to be themselves and be true to themselves, and as a result, endure torture.
We'll take one more question here and then let everyone wrap up. Joe.
Thank you. My name is Joe. Question more for CBT, but I guess it touches on Ukraine too. When you look at a conflict or an area of trouble that is generating large numbers of cases of people in need of rehabilitation, like Ukraine is now, when you're in the early stages of assessing what you can do. Obviously, there's already a lot of people who have left Ukraine and are in physical places of relative safety, so they can begin that process of healing. So when addressing these large conflict zones generating these problems, to what extent do you network the diaspora with the people in country, and as a whole healing process, do you already start engaging with the people that are in safe places, Ukrainian refugees now, and maybe they might become helpers in the process of rehabilitating others in country down the road?
Thank you for that question.
And afterward, you could do a closing remark.
You know, something that I think is really important is that CBT, we are not the only organization that does this work, and we have partner organizations around the world, and a big part of our portfolio of work is using our expertise to support the work of our colleagues who are doing this work. And I am just so thankful that we are not the only ones, because we are able to, the number of people we are able to serve in, you know, the course of a year is a very, very small number of everyone who needs the care, needs this particular rehabilitation. So, you know, and another piece of this is people do seek out care, and when they do, that's when hopefully we are able to be there. So I mean, in the United States, we have a healing center in St. Paul, and there are 40 other torture treatment centers in the United States that work with refugees and asylum seekers. So as people are able to be resettled, and then they can seek out that care. So, you know, we don't need to do it alone, and hopefully we are able to increase our capacity to serve more people. I think I mentioned I don't know if I mentioned this, but right now we're at a time where there are about 130,000 people who are displaced from their homes. That's a lot of people who've endured a lot of trauma. And I'm so terribly sad that an organization like
CBT has to exist. And at the same time, I'm so very glad that we do.
And I would just add, as a board member, we're there to be a resource, and we have board members coming part of Amnesty International, Refugee International, which is an organization based in Washington DC. So we're able to do this work in partnership with them, exchange information, talk through ideas. We have a person that their whole job is like doing external affairs. So like even when CBT in the last couple of years wanted to focus inward with, you know, issues within the United States, we wanted to do that work in partnership. As Laura mentioned earlier, anytime that we want to provide support, we never want to assume that we are the best organization to do this work. So, you know, we field and we look at who else is in the space, who else is doing this work before us, and then we do this work in partnership with them. To learn more about CBT, I would invite you to attend our Restoring Hope Breakfast, which usually happens in October 26th. October 26th. Yep, this year. I invited Orland to last year's, you know, and usually it happens in downtown Minneapolis. You can access our website for more information. Again, we're happy to come back again with a clinician, or if there's like any other experts that you want to hear from, bring them directly to you. Invite you to learn more using our website, and you know, we can exchange our information later too if you want to stay in touch. But thanks for the opportunity to share this space with you today.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you. You know, in Minnesota, I'll mention this again, that we have so much to be proud of. Your organizations that we've worked with in the past keep coming to mind, and I think of the Forward Global Women, funded by Senator Sandy Pappas of Minnesota, and Mel Duncan's Nonviolent Peace Force. We work with them, and so there's so many of them that have been founded here in Minnesota that have become a worldwide organization. It's something that we really need to be proud of. Roman, we're going to give you back to Juliana. Please send her our love and happy Valentine's to both of you. Thank you so much for participating, and just a wealth of knowledge, and we're so proud of the work that you're doing in your country. So if you have a final goodbye and some final words or remarks, please do so.
I just wanted to thank all of you again for your time and for, you know, because time is the greatest gift we can give to anybody in this world. So I feel very honored to have an opportunity to speak to you and have your time to listen to my story and what I had to share. Unfortunately, you know, the conflicts like this happen again. You know, after the Second World War, we all said never again. But at this stage, it seems like it's happening again. And it's very unfortunate. And I think it's all of our responsibility to make sure that it doesn't happen again. You know, and I want, again, to thank all of you for an opportunity to speak today, to share. If any of you would have any additional questions to me personally or to Juliana, Kurt and Sharon are there. They have my contact information. I allow them to share it directly with you. You can write me an email, WhatsApp, Viber, Telegram, LinkedIn, Facebook, any platform that is comfortable to you. I'm going to answer. I promise you that. We can get on a call, and I would be happy to support any of you in any way that I can. So thank you very much. Wish you an amazing day ahead. Make sure to celebrate the Valentine's Day real well today. And yeah, thank you again. Bye.
Thank you very much. So that's our program. This we could have taken all of your questions today. Yeah, and Roman is absolutely correct. Just about any kind of social media that exists, he's on. So every time I hear from him, I have to figure out if it's Facebook or if it's Messenger or if it's WhatsApp. You know, there's all kinds of different ways of connecting with him. So would it be possible if Sharon and Kurt gave his contact information to Tuesday Open House and you publish it in the newsletter? Okay, so we'll do that. And then remember Roman's own kind of passion right now, and that is the foot warmers for the soldiers at the front. And it's not a huge amount of money that it's a goal of $5,000 that he needs. And any way that you can help support him in that, that would be great. So thank you very much, and it's been great to be here at my podium again. And I wish you luck with this wonderful program that's been going on for so many years. Thank you.